All right, so in case you haven't noticed, two things are going on right now. Gravel riding has exploded, obviously, and nobody has any gravel bikes for you to buy. But if you've already got a road bike with generous tire clearance and disc brakes, I may just have a solution for you. The Redshift Shockstop Suspension Stem. At first glance, this thing may seem a bit gimmicky, almost like too simple to really work well. It's one of the most "why didn't I think of that" ideas I've seen since early versions of suspension stems way back in the mid-90s. For the record, I had Allsopp's version on my Bridgestone MB1 and I loved it. And a few years later, I proudly rocked the Cane Creek Thudbuster for many years. So I kind of came into this knowing that the idea was pretty legit, and I had super high hopes that the guys at Redshift had pulled it off. And I'm happy to say they did. So let's back up and talk about how they did it for a second. In the 30 years since those early designs, suspension and what we know about it has come a long, long way. One important lesson is that a suspension stem doesn't need a lot of travel to be effective. 20 millimeters is enough. And the Shockstop also utilizes modern best practices for suspension pivot design, including the same fully sealed cartridge bearings that are used in high-end full suspension mountain bikes. So there's no slop, no play, and no maintenance. And because the travel is minimal and the pivots are perfect, the design can be too. Redshift placed the adjustable elastomers inside the stem out of sight, which makes it indiscernible from a regular stem at a distance. If you've seen feedback from other reviewers, you already know this thing is nearly flawless. My first install was on the gravel bike, and it couldn't have come at a better time because I was having a bit of a problem with a really stiff fork. The front end was punishing me on descents, and I needed something to soften things up. And after a few test rides with different elastomer combos, I'm never taking this thing off. 20 mil is just enough to take the edge off washboards and trails that are littered with horse or cow tracks. And when you're blasting across the flats or downhill at speed, you get a nice level of cush that helps smooth out even higher amplitude bumps. But suspension, and good suspension, isn't just about eliminating bumps. It's also about improving handling and reducing fatigue without sacrificing efficiency. Your handling will improve because you get just enough spring to keep your front tire in contact with the road or trail in a choppy corner. And on the efficiency front, as long as you get the elastomer set up right, it doesn't bounce up and down like a pogo stick when you're out of the saddle. In fact, I hardly notice it's there when I'm standing up and yanking on the bars. And of course, like any good suspension, it dramatically reduces the amplitude of any bump you hit, which makes it easier to ride for much longer periods without feeling like you're holding onto a jackhammer. To illustrate the point, let's pause and take a closer look at how it acts when your hands are in different positions on the bars. When you're way out here on the hoods, you get the full range of suspension. But when you go down to the drops, it tightens up a bit, and when you're on the bar tops, it's virtually non-existent because you've essentially shortened the lever distance required to actuate the suspension. And that brings me back to my original point. I was lucky enough to snag a gravel bike before COVID hit, but a lot of you weren't. So I tried the Shockstop on my Cervelo R5 and basically transformed it from a light-duty road bike to a medium-duty gravel bike. And then when I decided to use my new Time road bike for BWR at the last second because it had SRAM Force axis on it and I like the gearing better, it had the exact same effect. If you're wanting to tackle tougher routes on your road bike but need a little something extra up front, this is the ticket. I just checked their site and stock levels appear good, which means you can expand your riding options for less than the cost of a pair of decent bib shorts. In other words, if you've been on the fence about a Shockstop stem, it's time to grab one because all the rave reviews you hear are true. And I might just get myself one of their seat posts too. Thanks for watching, and as always, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell before you go. All right, see you next time.